Good Wednesday morning, friends, or afternoon or evening, or whenever you happen to join. For those that I may not know, I'm Reverend Jennifer Finley, our Momentum and Discipleship Pastor here at First United Methodist Church in Kirksville. And at least here, it is a sunny day outside, a little different than our snowy morning yesterday. And there's some beautiful sunlight streaming through our windows here in our sanctuary. And this is one of my favorite spots to come on a morning when the sunlight is coming in, to simply find a time of peace, to settle in for whatever the day may hold. And so today I thought I would share this space with you. Our sanctuary is always open when our building is open. And so if you ever need a time and simple space to take a deep breath, you are welcome here. This is our time together each and every week in the middle of the week, regardless of what's swirling in our world, to take a deep breath together, to settle in for a few moments and to simply ask that question: where are we seeing God at work in our world? Where have we seen or felt or sensed God's presence moving in our world? Now, we've talked about that some weeks that question is really easy to answer, and other weeks it's harder. And that's part of the ebb and flow of our spiritual lives. That's part of the ebb and flow of being in our world together. And I know that that question can be a hard one some weeks. Maybe weeks like this, where we've seen news once again of another school shooting, where our hearts are breaking with families once again, and where we wonder, what on earth can we do to prevent, to change our world in a way that would mean that we don't hear this heartbreak on the news. And so I know that as we gather this morning for this time, asking that question, where are we seeing God at work in our world, might be a harder one than it sometimes is some weeks. And that's okay, because we allow our question and wondering to happen together in the midst of all of that. So this morning I thought I would share one place where God showed up for me in this last week. It was here in this space, or also online on our Sunday morning worship time. And we were talking about the story of Ezekiel and the dry bones, and also the story of Lazarus and his family. And there was a moment where Pastor Scott said to the congregation gathered, and I imagine many of you who were also online, you know that song, Them Bones? And I don't know what I expected, but I did not expect everyone to start singing. I am not going to sing it for you, but there was this holy moment when suddenly there was a quiet. It wasn't loud, wasn't boisterous, just a quiet. Them bones, them dry bones. And there was something holy in that quiet moment, friends. It caught me by surprise. Something holy about us all together, whether we were in the building or online, singing a song, a little joy in the midst, but also that recognition that there was power in the story of the bones coming together and God breathing new life into them. That's been one of my favorite stories for a long time in Scripture, one of my favorite visions. But to hear us, to see us, start to imagine what that looks like. God met me in that moment, and perhaps God met you in something similar. I will admit, as I'm sitting here staring out at an empty sanctuary on this Sunday, I'm reminded of the multiple times over the years of COVID where we stared out at an empty sanctuary, knowing y'all were out there online and we were gathering in those ways, but not knowing, being uncertain about what the future held. Would these pews ever hold people again? On Sunday morning, we did both of those things, and the Spirit moved, and that was beautiful, and God met me in that moment. We talked about Ezekiel on Sunday morning. We also talked about Lazarus, and that's the other place that God met me on Sunday. Surprised me, honestly, in a story that I thought I knew, and a story that wasn't really one of my favorite stories in Scripture, the story of Mary and Martha and Lazarus. And we talked a little bit on Sunday about Mary and Martha and their questions to Jesus. But what caught me was the end of the story. When Jesus goes to the tomb of Lazarus, who has been dead 4 days, and he's weeping along with Mary and Martha. And he calls to Lazarus and he says, "Lazarus, come out." And then Lazarus comes out of the grave. But the scripture says, the dead man came out, his hands and feet bound with strips of cloth and his face wrapped in a cloth. Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go." What caught me by surprise was that Jesus said to them, "Unbind him." I'm not sure why I had never heard it in this way before, but the them that's referring to is the people who would gather, not just Mary and Martha, but a crowd of others that had gathered around, those who were mourning and grieving with them. Maybe there were just some other curious folk, but it was their community gathered around, and Jesus turned to the community and said, "Unbind him." And that got me to thinking that unbinding, that process of resurrection and restoration is a work of God, but it is also part of community. Lazarus was not meant to unbind himself, to set himself free. It was meant to happen in community. And that got me to wondering, when have we been a part of that process of unbinding, of being a part of new life in each other's lives and in our world? Now, I know that sometimes we think about that unbinding, that unshackling as needing to be big actions. We look at our world and we look at school shootings and we think, I want to be a part of change, and we think that has to be big. And there is a role for that, friends. There is a role for us to advocate. There is a role for us to write our legislatures. There is a role for us to be a part of big action in the world. But I also wonder, what does it look like in small ways too? What does unbinding each other look like in small ways? Maybe it looks like listening to the story of the friend who's in the process of coming out of the grave. Maybe it means listening without judgment or trying to solve or fix anything. Maybe it means offering a hug or a touch, or simply being present as a witness as new life is struggling to come. I know I have been part of those kind of moments when I've shown up for others. I've also had those kind of moments in my life when others have been present in those kind of ways, and there is power in that, friends. So I wonder, what other kinds of ways have you been a part of, or can you imagine, are part of unbinding, unshackling us so that new life and restoration may come? Can you recall a time when someone helped you in that process? What did that look like and feel like and sound like? When someone helped you remove those grave clothes, what does it feel like and sound like when you are part of that in someone else's life? I know those things seem small in the big picture of our world, but they are indeed ways that our world can change. And they are beautiful ways that we can be present in each other's lives. Some of those are ways that we lost during the early days of COVID, and now we can resurrect some of those practices of sitting with each other, of hugging, of touching, of listening in a very intimate kind of way. And so my hope and my prayer is that wherever you are today, whether you are the one that is starting those tentative steps out of a grave where Jesus is holding your hand, that you will have a community around you to help start to pull off those grave clothes, little by little, by being present. And if you are in a time when that is not you, perhaps you can dream together with us about ways we can do that for each other. And as we're doing it for each other, also doing it for our world. Because Jesus doesn't simply breathe new life and then walk away. Jesus partners with us to create new life together. So whatever that looks like today, friends, know that you are not alone. And if you'd like to talk more about those ways, our doors here are always open. Go in peace.